Welcome, everyone, to this IUN Community Garden Session, Spring Garden Cleanup. Dolly Foster will be our presenter today. Dolly is a landscape horticulturalist and has been a master gardener for 22 years, an Indiana Accredited Horticulturist for 20, and a certified arborist since 2008. For the past 22 years, Dolly has been presenting lectures on many garden topics. She spent several years as an adjunct faculty member in the Joliet Junior College Agriculture Horticulture Department and 18 years in the Parks and Recreation industry as a staff horticulturalist for two park districts. Dolly also managed the Oak Lawn Community Garden. Dolly has been butterfly gardening from the very beginning of her gardening career. Her passion has led her to raising monarch and swallowtail butterflies, which she has done for the past 15 years. Her garden at home has been a monarch way station since 2011. Dolly, welcome, and we are so glad to have you with us today.
Thank you very much. I'm so glad to be here today, and I'm so glad there's so many people on with us today. That's really fun. Amanda did a very nice intro, and so I'm not going to repeat any of that, but I will say that today's program is going to be pretty heavily based on pruning and cleaning up the garden, so hopefully this will be really helpful to you. Spring garden cleanup is one of those topics that can be pretty vast. It can be pretty big. So, um, I've tried to narrow down things so that it is not a hugely long lecture. So we have an hour and 15 minutes to get through this. So let's get started. So, the first thing that I usually do when spring is starting to come, when it's getting to be about late February, early March, the first thing I do is I try to think of the things that I can do like right now. It's not garden stuff all the time, but it's stuff that needs to get done around the yard. And I try to start making a plan of what I want to do for the spring and for the summer. That's really helpful. And if you can if you can make that list, identify those priorities and then keep that list somewhere handy. That is very helpful because usually I make that list and then I forget where I put the list. It's an ongoing problem. But you want to try and make a list of the accomplishments that you want to do for the year. Like you want to clean out this area, you want to clean out that area, you want to replant. Um, what are the supplies that you're going to need for the year? I've already started purchasing some supplies for this year because what Amanda did not mention was that I have a very, very small plant nursery at my house. I call it a micro nursery. So trying to make a list of all the supplies I'm going to need for that is sort of like the late winter activities for me also. Uh, if you are interested in ordering any very large, expensive arbors or concrete fountains or anything kind of any big purchases like that, right now is the time to get into the garden centers and order those or purchase them now, because if you wait until May or the beginning of June, they'll be gone. They won't be available. Order your seeds if you're going to order seeds. Right now is a good time. In fact, I usually start ordering my seeds in late fall, but seeds are still aplenty in almost all of the garden catalogs that I've seen online. So order your seeds, get your planting trays and anything else that you need if you're going to start plants indoors. If you are winter sowing and growing in milk jugs like I do for my plant sale, you still have time to make milk jugs with annuals in them and some perennials. You're going to prune grapevines, and fruit trees. You're going to winter sow any vegetables that you want to winter sow along with annuals. Um, and then spring sowing is kind of a different subject. So we're not going to cover that today, but if you want more information on spring sowing, we can talk about that during questions. So keep all these notes most conveniently in a notebook, and you have to locate the notebook though when you need it. But the first thing that I usually do on the first nice day at the beginning of March or in the end of February, if we have some good weather, is I get outside and I kind of walk around the garden and start looking at things that I want to do. And I do make those priority lists, but then also I have to pick up the trash. I don't know about you guys, but I live in a corner and so much stuff just blows into my yard every winter. So I get out there with a garbage bag and just pick up a little bit here and there and make things tidy. So that's an important thing to do. And when you do, I kind of skipped ahead. When you do make your list of garden tasks for the summer, I don't want you to feel completely inundated or daunted by this big list because it might look like a really big list to you. But just be realistic with yourself, make that wish list of things that you want to do, but be realistic that you don't have to do them all this spring or even this summer. This could just be a list of things that you want to do within the next year. That's totally okay. Like gardening should never put pressure on you so much so that you feel like you're going out to work in the garden rather than going out and playing in the garden. My husband always reminds me of that every year. But again, get out there and pick up trash, pick up branches that may have fallen in the garden, and then replant heaved plants. So a heaved plant is a plant that has been pushed out of the ground over the winter because we have had freeze and thaw, freeze and thaw, freeze and thaw periods, and the soil contracts and expands so many times that sometimes a shallow rooted plant will just be expelled from the ground. It's a very weird phenomena, but it does happen. So go around and just, if you notice any of that, put those back in the ground right away. The faster, the better. Usually I can just push them back in with my boot and they're just fine. You don't want to crush them, but you can push them back in. So then as you're going out and you're inspecting the garden, inspect your plants, note which ones have died over winter. This is going to be something that you're going to notice a little bit later when plants are starting to come up, which some plants are starting to come up. But notice things that have disappeared or died over the winter. Note whether or not you want to replace them. Rewrite plant markers if you have plant markers. Get a good marker like the garden marker and rewrite those tags as you go. So there's lots of things that you can do in late winter. Again, replant those heaved plants. If you're raking up leaves in your garden, this is probably when you're really going to notice those heaved plants because the rake is going to pick them up and toss them across the yard. So just keep an eye out for those. Yeah, even though you see a heaved plant, it doesn't mean it's dead. Usually you can push it right back into the ground or maybe dig a little bit larger hole for them, get them back in the ground. The soil should not be frozen now. We've gone through enough warm weather in the past 3-4 weeks that the soil might have some ice crystals in it, but it's not frozen. And then this is also a time for you to get into the garage and inspect your tools and see if any of your tools need to be sharpened. Do they need to be repaired? Do they need to be replaced? Check your rakes, make sure they are all in functional order. But it's also a good time of year to go out and buy new tools because the new tools are available at the garden centers, starting in March and April. So these are 4 of my favorite tools. On the top left is the soil knife. This is an A.M. Leonard tool, and it is the soil knife that has the sharp teeth on it. So it is pretty sharp, and I have cut myself with my soil knife in the past. But this is an excellent tool for weeding, for mixing soil, and for digging little holes. The soil scoop below it is really good if you have soft soil in your garden. If you are working with clay soil, then the soil knife is really ideal for you to put perennials in and annuals. But the soil scoop is great for mixing potting soil, potting mix, and also really good if you have like loose sandy soil, loamy soil. The little hand plow over here in the bottom on the right is an excellent weeding tool and an excellent tool for sowing seeds in a vegetable garden if you have to make small furrows. And then the one above it on the top right is something called a sod lifter. So this is a tool with a very long handle, usually about 60 to 72 inches, and this tool can be sharpened on a grinder. And I'm going to show you what you can do with it later on today. One of the things you can do is you can cut grass out of the lawn if you're making a new garden or something and if you don't want to rent a sod cutter and you have a very small area to do, a sod lifter will work for you. This is what golf courses use for some of their jobs, but you can use it to edge your garden, and I'm going to show you a photo of that later on. So, now let's get into pruning. So a lot of what we're going to talk about today, again, is going to be pruning. So when you get out there in the spring and you're looking around at things, I want you to examine those landscape trees. You know, I have noticed for the past 2 years that my eastern redbud really desperately needs to be pruned. And not only just pruned, half of the tree is falling over. And so it really needs to be cut this year. But, you know, like last year, all I could get out and do was just prune some branches. So get out there and examine your trees and kind of identify what needs to be pruned. If you have any oak trees, you have to wait until November to prune oak trees. They do not like to be pruned in the spring or summer. Maple trees can be pruned in the spring, but not the early spring, like May, spring, later on. Check for weaknesses in the branches, check for disease damage, check for hazard branches that are hanging over parking areas and things like that, broken branches. Damage to your tree trunks is important. Codominant trunks of old trees might need to be cabled. So that's where a tree has one trunk and then they split off. And sometimes, in order to keep that tree intact, you have to cable those two uh, upper trunks together. And so that's kind of a big thing. You have to have an arborist do that for you. So keep an eye out on what needs to be pruned in respect to your trees. Check your landscape shrubs for tip dieback and only prune the hydrangeas that need it. And you're really only going to give the hydrangeas a really intricate prune, like a hard prune after they bloom. Like you do not, if you don't know what kind of hydrangea you have, what species, you don't want to go and prune those too heavily in the spring because some of them have flowers on them that formed last fall or last summer. So hydrangeas is another thing that we can talk about at the end. I don't have a lot to say about it right now because it can kind of be a whole lecture in its own. Um, Pruning out old branches from red twig dogwoods is really important at this time of the year. Anything that is not that bright red color anymore, or orange if you have an orange one, or yellow if you have yellow. Um, any of the older, bigger canes are what should get cut out right now. Usually they are an off color. They look like they're getting canker. They kind of look gnarly. It's time for them to go. So let's talk a little bit more about cane plants. So plants grow from a trunk, shrubby plants and trees either grow from a trunk um, or canes. And so how can I explain this? Canes are like in this diagram, this is raspberries, and this is how you treat raspberries in the garden to keep them from going out of control and to support them. But this is a plant that grows by canes, and so there are new stems that are coming up every year. And dogwoods do the same thing, and several other shrubs like spirea and things like that. Think of shrubs that grow with lots of new twiggy growth every year, and you don't know what to do with it. So we're going to talk about that today because I think this is a really important part of pruning that often gets overlooked, but these are really popular shrubs that people have in their garden and should be taken care of properly. So if you do have raspberries, you need to kind of identify what species of raspberry you have because some of them are single fruiting and some are double fruiting. So, but for most of them, it's okay to go through in the spring and take out all of the canes that have already fruited because they're not going to fruit again. No matter which type you have, if you have canes that don't look healthy and they had fruit on them last year, then they probably are going to have to go. Um, you can probably take out as many as you want, thin it out as much as you want, and then fertilize. Um, Other shrubs that you can do this with are things like buddleia, caryopteris, which is called bluebeard also, perovskia, which is Russian sage. They grow kind of in this manner, but none of these grow as big or as wide as a raspberry. Whenever you do this kind of cutting where you're cutting out big parts of a shrub, then it's very important for you to go back and fertilize. And you can use any kind of granular shrubby fertilizer that you can find. I don't really recommend the stakes, the fertilizer stakes that you put in the ground. I think that it takes too long for them to dissolve and become available to plants. I really like granular products that I can put right around the base of the plants. And when you fertilize, and I've said this in all of my other lectures on here, that when you fertilize, you always short the plant of fertilizer. You always put on less than it says that it needs, because less is more with fertilizer. If you put too much, you run the risk of burning the roots of your plant. So always pour on less, shake out less, whatever, read the directions, put less on. So let's talk about two really specific types of pruning. So what we just talked about was pruning for plants that have canes. But we're going to talk about what happens when we have a plant that has cane growth, but they've kind of been overgrown and they have been neglected, and you want to renew them. You want to start over, but you don't want to put in a new shrub, but you kind of want to start over because the whole thing is a big mess. And if you do have a plant that is in control, you can just take out the two oldest canes every year, and that keeps it under control. And so this list of plants here is what I would use this for. Lilac shrubs, forsythias, which can easily get out of control very quickly, roses, honeysuckle vine. If you have honeysuckle shrubs or bushes, those really should be taken out and destroyed because those are an invasive species. But what I'm talking about here is the native honeysuckle vine, coral honeysuckle. Burning bush, if you have them and you're going to take care of them and you're going to keep them pruned properly so that they don't seed everywhere, then that's fine. You can probably keep them, but they are also going to go onto the invasive species list, just like honeysuckle bush did. A couple of other plants that also fall into this category where they grow lots of canes and they need to be controlled every once in a while. Sand cherry, ninebark, weigela. Oak leaf hydrangea is another one that can grow lots of canes. Dogwood, Annabelle hydrangea, and that's all I can think of right now. So these are plants that continuously put out new stems every year. So renewal pruning. You want to remove 1/3 of the branches over 3 seasons. We're doing this with the fruit trees at the IUN community garden. So we're on the second year of pruning with those fruit trees, trying to get them, well, the apple tree, we're trying to get shorter so we can reach the fruit. But the reason why we would do this renewal pruning is, for one thing, lilacs. Get lilac borer when the main trunks or stems get too large. When they get to be about 1 inch in diameter, they run the risk of getting lilac borer. So this is a cane growing shrub that needs to be pruned. And the way you do it is you remove the two biggest canes every year. I just mentioned that earlier. So that's kind of the 1/3 every year idea. To regain control over a shrub, you would do this hard 1/3 cutting over 3 years. So year 1, you remove the largest and the oldest stems. Year 2, use your thinning technique to remove another 1/3 and cut back the new growth a little bit to control the size of the shrub. And then year 3, you're going to thin out the remaining big old branches. So over 3 springs, you can really get good control over a shrub that you think that you might have thought that would have to be taken out because it's out of control. So this is a diagram of this. Again, step 1, take out those biggest and oldest. Step 2, continue with thinning. And step 3, cut out the other biggest ones. And you guys can find diagrams about this all over the internet. Take a picture of this slide if you want. That's okay. So another way of keeping shrubs in control is to do annual rejuvenation pruning. And so this is what I always suggest for spirea. I did this for years at my old jobs because we had spirea. And trying to prune a spirea shrub, if you don't remember what they look like, they look like this. So trying to prune a spirea shrub every year and just like taking out the dead stuff and trying to shape it or shaping it with shaping it with shrub trimmers. It doesn't really work for this shrub because they grow by canes. So you can see here in this little diagram on the left, what I mean by cane growth is lots of stems coming up in a group, and that makes up the shrub. Okay. So for rejuvenation pruning, you're going to take out the old stems. You are going to do this in early spring and then fertilize right after you do it. And then you're going to do another pruning. So in the fall, the plant is intact. Early spring, we're going to cut the whole thing down to the ground. Don't panic. This is the same thing that we do to shrub roses. This is the same thing that we do to dogwoods. This is the same thing we can do to ninebark. And what this does is it forces the shrub to put out all new growth as long as it's getting a little bit of food, a little bit of fertilizer. And it keeps it fresh. It keeps it the size that was intended to be in the landscape. Instead of it being 4 feet tall, it's only 2 feet tall, that kind of thing. It also keeps the plant from getting canker, and canker disease can spread throughout all the stems on a shrub and kill the shrub. So we don't want that. It's a fungal disease. So we cut down in early spring. We're going to fertilize right after we cut the whole thing down. In late spring, you're going to have all of this twiggy growth, and you just kind of single out the largest 6 or 10, and you trim off everything else in between. So that's what this diagram shows. And then after that, the shrub is going to grow and it's going to bloom and hopefully look like this. Now, do you have to do this annual shrub pruning every year? You really don't. For spireas, I do consider this important to maintain the health of the plant, but you can do it every other year. If you don't think that this plant needs it, after you did it 1 year and then year number 2, you're looking at it and you're like, oh, I don't think this really needs to be cut down again, then don't wait a year. You just don't want it to get really, really big and woody and then try and go back and meticulously prune off little tiny twigs here and there because your plant will lose its shape. I do want to go over clematis or clematis pruning because this is kind of mysterious for gardeners. When you buy a clematis, it's going to fall into one of 3 pruning groups. Okay, so you guys can take a quick picture of that slide if you want to. And I'm going to show you a diagram and make some explanations. All right, so group 1, this is going to be the clematises that all bloom early in summer. So this is going to be like those late May and early June bloomers. They're going to be kind of a big burst of bloom first thing in the season and then nothing for the rest of the season. And so as you can see here for group 1, what we're going to do is we're going to head back the stems, take off the dead wood, make sure that there's no dead, vines. The whole vine isn't dead. Trim those off if it is, and that's it. But if that vine needs to be completely reworked for size, that is done right after it's bloomed. So first thing in the spring, just clean it up a little bit. Just take off some of that dead twigs. You want to do this after it starts leafing out, and then control it after the bloom. Group 2 is going to be the group of clematis that bloom real big in summer. And this is going to be like mid to late June. And then they have another blooming in September. So that's the kind that I've had for years and years. And this is exactly how I've always pruned mine. You just take down all those stems by about half, take off all the dead twiggy stuff that you can see. But if you take it down about halfway, then that controls the size. Because if anyone has ever planted Jackmani clematis, that's in group 1. Jackmani can get out of control and grow enormous pretty quickly within about 5 years. And then most gardeners are like, oh my gosh, what do I do with this thing? It's a total monster. But if you do this kind of pruning every year, it keeps it in control. And especially the ones in group 2, I think they're pretty easy to prune. And then the group 3 ones are going to be like Virginsbauer, which is our native, one of our natives. And then the other varieties of clematis that have like a bell flowered shape, there's a yellow and a purple. And these get cut down pretty much to the ground, to the trunk. And you just remove all of the stems. And this can be done in fall after they're done blooming. So this is a task, the group 3 clematis can be done in fall. Now, one of the most popular group 3 clematis that we grow in this area is going to be sweet autumn clematis. And I just want to let you know that sweet autumn clematis is an invasive species. It's not on the invasive species list yet, but I am sure it will end up there eventually because it does reseed. And if you have one or know someone that has one, you know that this is the problem. It's one of my bigger pests in my garden that I'm constantly battling with because they're hard to remove. They're hard to kill. You have to get the crown out of the ground if you have a small one that is just kind of climbing all over everything in the garden. And that's what they do. They climb all over everything in the garden, smother your garden. So if you do have a sweet autumn clematis, consider digging that out this spring and disposing of it because it is nasty, and replacing it with Virginsbauer, which is our native, which is much more tame, which doesn't grow as large. It only grows about 10 feet tall. It blooms earlier. It's just as attractive to bees. And it's a lot easier to handle because it doesn't grow 30 feet in a year. Okay, so this is just a couple more little diagrams of each group. So again, group 1, you're just going to, first thing in the spring, take off the damaged stems, dead stems, things like that. And then occasionally, it says here, occasionally thin every few years will help them perform too. So that's exactly what we would do for lilacs and dogwoods and things like that. Again, group 2, you're just going to head everything back by almost half in the spring. And then that keeps it in check. That keeps the size controlled. And they're very easy to take care of. And then, of course, group 3 gets cut down to the ground. Oh, wait. Group 2 and group 3 here look really similar. Group 3, though, you can take it down even lower. I mean, I've taken it down to just one trunk in the spring. And so it can do that. You can cut pretty harsh on those. They don't care. All right. One thing that is a big problem with clematis is clematis wilt. The symptoms of this are pretty easy to see. You're going to see one or more stem of your clematis just seemingly die overnight. They're just going to be gone in one night. They're just going to turn black. They're going to wilt. And this is the fungus Phoma clematidina. And this is how you fix it. You are going to dig a hole. You got to get down at the base of your clematis and dig a hole. And you have to cut down under the ground below the soil line where the affected stem was attached to the crown. And you take that off right there with clean pruners, and then you need to clean your pruners afterward. You cut below the affected tissue, and then, but above the crown, so don't cut into the crown, of course. And then new shoots will come up and they will be unaffected. So basically, this is a fungal disease that is, that grows just in the stem that is affected. Unless it gets down to the crown and then spreads into more than one stem, it's pretty much just going to be one stem. And if you can cut that below the bad tissue, above the good tissue, then you should be okay. They should grow back. This is the clematis that I have, that I've had them for about 20 years now, 22 years, I think, but I'm down to only one because the other 2 died just because of old age, I think. But General Sikorsky is absolutely beautiful. I think this one is also called the President, and there's debate whether or not they're the same. But this one is a group 2, group B, and big flush of flowers, and then it spits out flowers for the rest of the summer. It's really nice. All right, pruning wisteria. I'm not going to go through this because it's quite a lengthy procedure. You have to prune wisteria to keep them healthy and to keep them in check. You need to prune them 3 times a year, and the first prune is going to be late February, early March. So we're not too late yet, because it's still pretty cold. It's gotten cold again. And so you prune back each stem so that it has 3 buds. And then this is the middle. This is the stem that is going to be going to the main vine. So you cut it back pretty harsh, and you have to cut them in the late winter, you have to cut them in August, and I think you cut them again in November. So it's a 3-part pruning process, but if you do it right and you do it every year and you stick to that schedule, you can have a wisteria in a really small place. This one is growing on someone's laundry pole in the backyard. I thought this was a really great way to reuse a laundry pole because sometimes they're impossible to get out. So this is a really great way to reuse that laundry pole in a good way, in a productive way. And again, try and avoid Chinese varieties of wisteria. Try and find Kentucky wisteria because that's our native. All right, so this is a big section that we're going to go over right now. This is really important. I want everybody to pay attention to this really, really well because there has been a lot of debate about how to clean and tidy up a perennial garden and what you should do, cutting down, not cutting down. What I have done consistently for many years is in fall, I will cut down anything that is diseased. And the number one thing that is diseased in my garden every year are my peonies. And so they have the black spot disease, which is called botrytis blight. And when they start to exhibit those black spots on the leaves, then I cut them down, and that's usually August. All right, and that's usually the only thing. That and I take out my annuals. Don't compost any diseased plants that you cut down in the fall. You have to remove them and dispose of them. In the spring, don't be in a big hurry to clean up your garden. So I know last week was nice out, 70-degree temperatures, people want to get out in their garden, but there are insects in our environment that use the stems of our plants to lay eggs in the fall. And having those fresh green stems in the fall to put their eggs in is really important. But what I have learned just in the past couple of years that it's really important to have old stems in the garden for them to lay eggs in, because sometimes 2 different species of bee will reuse a little nesting site in a stem. Sometimes they would rather have a woody stem than a fresh green stem to put their eggs in. So it's important to kind of pay attention to the diagram that I'm about to show you. And we can make sure that everybody gets a PDF of this handout today. So what you do if you have a perennial garden, especially if it has natives, is you go through the garden in beginning of April, and you can cut down your perennials to about 15 or 18 inches tall. So leave some stems of your plants. Once your plants regrow, you're never going to notice those dead stems. You just aren't. They're going to be hidden. And those are the stems that later on in the summer, those dead stems are the ones that the bees will use. Okay. If you have to cut things down all the way to the ground for, some reason, then you would take all of the sticks from those plants and hopefully have someplace on your property that you can just kind of stand them up, put them into a brush pile or something, because the bees will still hatch from those stems, even though they've been cut. You can also take the cuttings you can take the cuttings that top, whatever of each stem, leaving the bottom. You can take those and you can just lay those in the garden and let them act as mulch. If you have kind of a casual garden, if your garden is really formal, then you probably can't do that. So taking the stems that you cut off and putting them into the compost or a brush pile again would be good for the insects. So whether or not you cut all the way down or only halfway. Okay, so this is a really important diagram. This came out of the University of Minnesota Extension Service and from the University of Minnesota Bee Lab. So if you're interested in native bees, the Bee Lab is a place where you're going to get a lot of information, a lot of really good information. So this is what this is a diagram of what I just said. Um, Wintertime, you have your dead stems up. In the spring, you cut them down by half, somewhere between 15 and 18 inches, but it says here 8 to 24, so it varies, how small you want to go. But the bottom half of the stems is where the baby bees are right now. Okay. They're in the fattest part of the stem. I think that's something that I didn't know for so long. And the very first time I ever saw this diagram, I swear to God, my mind just blew because I had been teaching for so many years, don't cut your garden down, don't cut your garden down. But no one had ever really made the connection. We're telling people not to cut their garden down, but we're not giving them any kind of strategy of how to actually clean up their garden in the spring. And it's important for a lot of gardeners to do that. So in the springtime, we're going to cut back our stems. We're going to leave the bottom parts because that's where the baby bees are. In the summertime, the plants are going to come up, they're going to bloom. You're never going to see the old stems. That next fall, this coming fall, we're just going to leave those dead stems up. In the wintertime, the dead stems from both years are side by side. In the spring, we cut down last year's stems in the same manner, somewhere between 18 and 15 inches, and then the baby bees will be able to hatch. And in this diagram, they're showing that you just drop the flower heads. And yeah, dropping the flower heads is not a bad idea for two reasons, because there's probably a few seeds left in the flower heads that the birds haven't gotten, and that can renew your clump of whatever native plant it is. Here it's cone flowers. It could be black-eyed Susans, could be cup plant, could be anything. And then you just keep going on and on like this. And then the oldest stems will just eventually rot off of the plant. And that's okay, because if you are doing this, and what they call it is the chop and drop, if you are doing chop and drop, then what you are doing eventually is going to be building healthy soil. If you think about how these native plants live out in forests, meadows, prairies, tall grass prairie, short grass prairie, whatever, the plants' stems stay there for years until they just collapse under their own weight. The bottom gets wet, the bottom gets eaten, and the stem just falls over and becomes part of the detritus in the bottom of the prairie or the meadow. And then it eventually rots away, and that is what builds soil, is rotting organic material. So the steps are over here on the left-hand side. The right-hand side, I'm telling you that this diagram, the first time I saw it, blew my mind. And again, we'll make sure that everybody gets a copy of this. And you can go on the University of Minnesota Extension site and also get it yourself. Use a little bit of searching, but we'll make sure you get it. So this is from my garden. This is a square stem of cup plant. And this is a stem that I found about 4 years ago now, 3 years ago. And what this is the hole where the bees made their nests in a cup plant stem. And honestly, this was the first time I ever found this, and it was in an enormous area at work, an enormous cup plant planting, just absolutely huge. So I just want to show you some more pictures because we're going to be running out of time here soon. This is what my garden looks like before I cut everything down. I just leave everything up over the winter. It looks really crazy messy, and some of you who aren't into this probably think that this is absolutely horrible. But what I do is I do go through and do the chop and drop. This is from last year, and the year before I did not cut down, I don't think, and so it's really, really messy. I do not rake leaves out of my garden. I actually have my lawn guys blow leaves into my garden every week in the fall because I want that coverage and I want that organic matter in my garden. And so everything pretty much just stays in my garden. The plants kind of fight their way through it. But that's not unlike how it works in nature. So to clean up though, I go through, chop and drop. There are stems that are existing in there that are a little bit hard to see, but if you look close, you can see stems that are, about 1.5 feet tall. And you can see where I have chopped up some of the old milkweed stems for the mulch. I have not put real, regular, man-made mulch on my garden for about 24 years because the last time it happened, the last time I did it, it was too deep and I got a fungus. So to clean up this big bed was about 45 minutes to do the chop and drop, 30 minutes to pull out Creeping Charlie because it's just a problem in my garden, and 30 minutes to clean up after that. Once I started doing this chop and drop method, I went from filling up about 12 to 14 big paper bags of garden refuse to about 3, maybe 2. And that's just because I have to dispose of the Creeping Charlie and a few other things that are pretty nasty. So it really reduced how much of my waste is going off of my property because when we're doing this kind of gardening, that is a goal. Our goal is to keep everything on property. Water, organic material, insects, anything, wildlife. We want to keep it all on property. So this is just another shot of the garden after it was cleaned up. So now my daffodils and things have room, and my daffodils really are a problem with my native plants because their leaves tend to smother my natives, and so the daffodils are probably gonna come out in the next 2 years. Uh, Cut down last year's grasses. So if you have native grasses, you probably don't really need to do this, but if you have other species of grasses like maiden grass, then you do have to do this. And one way to do it is just to bungee cord them, have somebody with you if you can, and then use hedge trimmers just to cut them off. That's how the landscapers do it. You have to be really careful if you're going to do it in a team with hedge trimmers. Do not cut your partner's legs. It's really important to pay attention. Ask me how I know that. Okay, rake your flower beds and mulch. So if you are one of the gardeners that likes to clean up all the leaves out of your gardens, this is the time to do it, coming up at the beginning of April. But I caution you against not doing it. Try not to do it 1 or 2 springs. It will really save you a lot of time, and whatever insect life is in that leaf cover underneath it and in it will have a chance to hatch. And that includes butterflies and moths that are really important to our environment. And so I would really encourage you not to do that. But if you have leaves in your garden that you also intend to keep and they're getting kind of pancaked, they're kind of getting compressed and thick, then get out there with a rake and fluff them up a little bit. If you are going to mulch, mulch with about 4 inches of mulch. Don't make it any more. And make sure your plants are not touching the mulch. Give them a little ring so they don't rot. If you have iris in your garden, this is kind of a special case. We can't really treat these guys the same way I do my other natives. I do have really beautiful iris beds. I have 2, and I love iris, and I love peonies. And so I'm not 100% native, and I'm not going to apologize for it because I can still have a few things that are not native and have a functioning ecological garden. So I have this iris bed here cleaned out. It's important to do that because of iris borer. They should be cleaned regularly, like 3 times over the year if you have them. Peonies absolutely should be raked. They should have no kind of mulch or leaves in between the stems. Inside the ring of the stems should be completely clear, 0 mulch, 0 leaves. Because again, you run the risk of getting botrytis blight, which is exactly what happened to me. Apple and crab trees, try and clean up the fruit if you can, and prune them. Annuals, remove the whole plant, don't just cut off. Mums, do not cut anything until after Mother's Day, and then you're just going to trim them down to about 5 inches tall. And if you do that, wait until Mother's Day to cut anything on your mums. Your mums will live longer. Weed your garden. Important to weed your garden as early as possible in the spring. At this time of the year, if we have a warm day, it's not a bad idea to get out there and pull the Creeping Charlie before it really starts to creep again, because it can grow fast. If you have English ivy in your garden, now is the time to start pulling it out. It is considered an invasive species. Vinca vine is considered an invasive species. If you can thin them out, take them out, that would be a good time. If you are going to use a pre-emergent herbicide, anywhere in your garden to prevent weeds, you want to do that in early April. And you would use a product called Treflan, but I don't use it anymore. I used it for many years at the Park District, and I just really, I'm not comfortable using chemicals anymore. I had a pesticide operator's license for, I think about 17 years, and I'm just not comfortable using chemicals anymore. And I really try not to do it. So even if you're tempted to use preen, maybe try for a year, give your soil a break, and just hand weed. You can use glyphosate in your garden safely on very, very stubborn things. And I would only say things like maybe a bull thistle or, oh, what else would be appropriate? Just only really stubborn things and very, very small amounts. Like I have many, many sweet autumn clematis vines that have grown along my fence as a weed. And this year I am going to kill them. I'm going to kill them this spring. And I do have to do that with spray because I can't dig them out. They're too big. So there are applications where it is appropriate to use glyphosate. But the last time I had a bull thistle in my garden, I just put a big rock over the top and it died. So there's that. So, just try and work around using the chemicals. I don't promote them, but it is a tool in the toolbox if you need it. So this is where your sod lifter, remember that tool that I showed you that looked like a half moon at the beginning? That is the tool that I have used in the past to edge my garden. I haven't edged my garden in a long time, but I used to do it every year. Edge my garden, keep the grass out, make a really nice sharp edge. There is nothing better than a really nice sharp edge on a garden, let me tell you. That tickles my brain right there, that picture. I love that picture of my garden. It doesn't look like that right now, so that makes me kind of sad. But hopefully this year I'll be able to get out there and do it. But edging your garden is good because it keeps the grass from growing into your garden, which can be kind of a pest. Dividing perennials, this is a good time to do that. So here's the quick and dirty rules. If it blooms in the fall, you can divide in spring. If it blooms in spring, you can divide in fall. Pot up your extras, donate them to plant sales, give them to friends, that kind of thing. If you have Shasta daisy, divide right before they set flower buds in the spring. Don't do it in the fall. They die every time I do it in the fall. So that would be the only exception. There's a couple of other exceptions too, like iris and peonies. But for the most part, you can follow that rule with the perennials. For things like that have a woody stem, like heuchera and goat's beard and snake, simsifuga, echinops, leucanthemum, all of these can be cut apart. Their stems can be cut apart, stripped of the leaves, and you can replant the stem cuttings. This is the time now, if you see your hostas are coming up, your daylilies, your grasses, anything that's coming up with a donut in the middle, like that donut shape, that means that the original plant is dead, and all of the plants around the circle are new plants, they're new pups, and they can be pulled up and they can be split and replanted. But with hostas and daylilies, never divide down to one single stem or fan. Don't do that. It's kind of like cannas, if you're familiar with cannas, and peonies. You need to have several stems for it to become a functioning new plant. They need that tissue mass at the base. It's called the crown. If there's not enough crown tissue, it won't grow. So if I was to divide these up, I would not go down to one stem if I could. There's like one here that could probably be divided into one, but the others I would divide and leave a minimum of 3. Fertilizing your garden, not necessary if you have annuals, or sorry, not annuals, natives. Natives resent being fertilized. Don't do it. They usually shoot up, get tall, get weak, and then they fall over. They just don't like it. They don't need it. But if you do have a conventional garden for perennials, you can put some bone meal or bulb food down if you have daffodils and tulips and lilies. They like to have a little bit of food in the spring, mid-March. Mid-April, you can put a little bit of granular shrub fertilizer down for your shrubs. Early May, you can do select perennials with a little bit of a bloom booster. So that would be things like peonies and echinacea and fancy daylilies, stuff like that. And then mid-June, you can fertilize those perennials again. But again, the more natives you have, the less of that you have to do. If you are having problems in your garden, get out there and get a soil test done. You can get a soil test kit and instructions at the extension office. And it's free to get the kit, but to send the sample in, you do have to pay. You have to pay the lab. And it will tell you if you need certain things in your soil. So we're not going to go over this because we're kind of running out of time. But you can see all the different chemicals in your soil, all of the elements and percentages and parts per million. Your soil test will tell you all of those things. Sometimes they will send an explanation report with it that will tell you exactly what you need to do. Really good labs will do that for you. That way you don't need somebody to interpret it for you. And then other small tasks around the garden. Get out there and clean out your planters if you didn't do it in the fall. Put in fresh potting mix. I do use my potting mix over and over again in my big flower pots. But what I do usually do is I'll take out about 30% and replace and mix it all together and put in a little bit of slow release fertilizer. And that usually works out well. Like to take out all of the potting soil and discard that would be very expensive to replace it. Clean your bird feeders. And in fact, right now, if you have bird feeders with avian flu floating around in Lake and Porter counties and Stark County, and it's kind of hot in this area right now in the state. The last time I saw the map, I would probably take down my bird feeders, sterilize them as much as you can with bleach water, and I would put them away. Don't even feed birds right now, unless that has changed. As of about 3 weeks ago, that was the suggestion. And then oil your pruning tools. That's kind of important. You can use WD-40 or 3-in-1 oil works well. Start a compost pile at this time of year. There's a few directions here. Super easy. The secret to a successful compost pile and keeping it not smelling is to turn it once a month. It's really important to do that. And then this time of year, you can think about new activities for this year. You can raise butterflies if you want to. Try and figure out how to do it. Are you going to raise them inside? Are you just going to observe them outside? You can build a caterpillar house. That's what I had for several years. That worked out really well, keeping them safe from predators. And then there's going to be several local plant sales in the area. I'm sure if you're on Facebook and you're on any organizations, there's tons of plant sales in the spring. But the 3 that I'm involved in is Wild Ones, which is the Native Plant Society in the area. We meet at Gibson Woods the first Saturday of the month. But on May 3rd is our plant sale, and that's at Lake Etta this year. It's a really nice facility, and it's a great sale. Lots and lots of plants, all kinds of native plants. The Lake County Master Gardener plant sale is on May 10th. It's at the Lake County Fairgrounds in the Fine Arts Building. And that is to benefit the Lake County Master Gardeners scholarship and grant programs. And we have all kinds of plants. We have vegetables there, beautiful tomato plants and pepper plants, herbs. We're going to push the herbs even harder this year. We're going to get more. And we have perennials and a few trees and shrubs and lots of hanging baskets. And then, of course, my native plant sale is at my home. If you want more information about that, email me at plantsale@hortforyou.net. It's down on the screen. My sale, my opening weekend is May 30th to June 1st. And I sell plants all the way through to September 30th. So, things to remember. So everything that I told you today about cleaning up your garden, these are all ideas. They're not rules. They're suggestions. You know, they're to remind you that if you didn't think of something, maybe you want to do it this year. Every garden is different, and if your procedure that you do every spring works for you, then you don't have to do anything that I told you to do. But the biggest message that I want to tell you is that if you do make a big job list for yourself, don't feel overwhelmed. Um, just keep telling yourself you don't have to do it all at once. You don't have to do it all in one year, and get out there and enjoy your garden. It's really important for us to not, lose sight of the fact that gardening is supposed to be enjoyable. And then these are just a few shots of my garden from years ago when I had lots and lots of tulips. So they're kind of fun pictures. Okay, that's it. Let's talk questions.
Thank you so much, Dolly.
You're welcome.
We do have a question in chat about what the best time is to have burning bush removed.
Oh, any time of the year. Any time of the year. When you're removing an invasive, it's usually any time of the year. The little joy that I had yesterday was driving over by the extension and the Lake County court building, and there's a lot that's across the street from the Lake County court building, and it's got like big electrical equipment in it, and it was just really nice to see that all the weed trees that have grown there for years were all taken down. So that was just really nice to see. They're probably going to do some kind of construction, upgrade the equipment or something, and that's why they did it. But you can take down an invasive tree or shrub anytime you want.
There is another question in chat. How do I remove wild violet?
Oh, I would say actually don't remove wild violet, because wild violet is a native plant and it is a host plant for I think there's a little tiny butterfly that it's the host plant for. I can't remember what it is right now, but it's sort of important that we keep those now, because they're a native plant and because they are a butterfly host plant. And the butterfly that uses it for its caterpillars, this is the only plant. They're a specialist, just like monarchs. So the wild violet is the only plant that this butterfly uses. So I would say find somewhere in your garden, and as soon as they come up, find someplace on your property. If you don't like them, if you don't like the way they look, just move them into one place that is out of the way, out of your eye line when you're sitting in your backyard or whatever, and just let the butterflies have the plants.
Right, so we have another question in chat. So we have someone who wants to start a small veggie garden and plans to plant in ground. How would she treat the soil to get started?
I would say, if you had asked me this last fall, I would have said do the cardboard and mulch method. If you're taking up lawn right now, I would say cut the lawn out instead of using any kind of chemical to kill the lawn. If you had put down cardboard and mulch last fall, then those areas the grass would be dead now, and so you could just plant right through the cardboard, and the cardboard would eventually completely decay. But right now, I don't know. I might put down a frame over the lawn and do like a small raised bed, maybe 4 or 6 inches deep, and use landscape fabric under it to kill the lawn, and then compost in there. Otherwise, I don't know. Sod cutter, which are really big, expensive, hard to use pieces of equipment. I've never been able to use one. They're too heavy.
Thank you, Dolly. To clarify, though, the participant was actually asking how to treat the soil. She wants to garden in ground. Should she get topsoil and or compost? What are your thoughts?
I would say topsoil, a mixture of topsoil and mix it with compost. That is your best case scenario in a vegetable bed because it gives you the organic matter that you need, but then the topsoil also brings in the minerals that you need. And those things all end up in your vegetables, make your vegetables healthier. But as far as taking the grass out, if you have kind of like really weedy grass, um, if you just cut that out and start planting in it, no matter what you do, it's going to grow back. So I would consider there's so many different ways that you can do a raised bed. I would really suggest a raised bed. And what we did for our raised beds at the community garden I worked at was we did just build a wooden frame and then we got heavy duty landscape fabric and we stapled it to the bottom and that killed the grass and then we planted in on the top.
Hey Dolly, we have a participant that has two cherry trees, a smaller one and a medium-sized tree. The trees were doing well when she first moved to her home, but she didn't really know about pruning, and now the lower parts of the trees have stopped yielding fruit, and they also appear to have a fungus. She would like suggestions for how to prune them to save them and also how to treat that fungus.
Okay, well, depending on what kind of cherry tree it is, cherry trees kind of have a shortened lifespan in our area because of our cold winters. So if it does have a fungal disease on one or both of the trees, it might just be at the end of its life, unless you wanted to start treating the fungus. For that, I would say if you have photos of what it looks like, notes of how it looks, I would say go to one of the bigger garden centers like Allen's or Alsip. Oh, and Niemeyer's, if you're in Crown Point, Niemeyer's would be really good. And they will be able to help you find the right product. You may just need dormant oil and to spray dormant oil on your trees. And because that's really common with apples also. It's usually pretty safe for your fruit. Berry trees, yeah, they just don't last a whole many years. Like apples are really hardy here, but not always cherries and peaches. Gosh, if you get 7 years out of a peach in this area, you're lucky. But as for pruning your cherry branches, your cherry trees, I would say concentrate on any branches that are crossing. Take out any branches that are going through the middle of the tree, like backwards through the middle of the tree. All of the branches should be facing out and kind of horizontal. Any branches that are hanging down, going straight towards the ground, they should be cut off. Because one of the things that promotes fungus in fruit trees is lack of air circulation in the middle of the tree. And so you need to take out those branches that are obstructing the air from going through the trees. So any branches that are going the wrong directions and crossing and things like that. That will help. And then fertilize with a fruit tree fertilizer.
All right, it looks like that's it. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. And thank you very much, Dolly, for sharing this information with us today. It's always a pleasure to have you with us.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Have a great day, everybody.